Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, December the 1st, 2025. Happy December! Yes, it's the first day of December, and in this video I want to do a preview of the month ahead. So I'll be looking at the main astrological events as I see them over the course of a month and trying somehow to put it all together. But before I look at December in some detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for the first day of the month. So here is the horoscope for today, the positions of the planets set for noon, December the 1st, 2025, New York time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. So the first thing that we see today is that the moon is in Aries. So the moon is at 23 degrees Aries. It is making a square to Jupiter. So moon in Aries, moon in a fire sign. That looks like my lunar return. My lunar return is at around 22, 23 degrees Aries. And so we've got moon in Aries. We've got Mercury, Sun, Venus in Sagittarius. And so, that's a lot of fire. 4 out of the 7 traditional planets in fire signs. And that might mean that it's quite an active, quite exciting day when we're really able to see the possibilities, and we can sort of look beyond surface appearances, not get caught up too much in other people's feelings, maybe our own feelings. We can just see the broad picture. We can get an impression of it quickly, spontaneously, and that can be the basis for action. And moon in Aries is a very action-orientated place for the moon. The first thing the moon wants to do is act. That's perhaps how the moon responds. How do we get out of trouble? How do we deal with this situation? Moon in Aries, well, we do something. And so the moon is square Jupiter. So moon square Jupiter, you might say, is perhaps impulsive. It might want to sort of take things too far. It might overdo it. So there is perhaps a bit of a problem there. Oh, and the moon is also making a conjunction to Chiron. So we're at a time when Chiron and Jupiter are making a square. So the moon is picking up on this moon Chiron square, and so moon conjunct Chiron in Aries. I would see that as just wanting to do something different, because that can be what Chiron likes to do. Chiron does not like to follow the crowd. There may be good reasons why Chiron doesn't want to follow the crowd, connected with whatever wound that Chiron represents. Remember, Chiron can be the wounded healer, but I think it's not just what Chiron is about. And I think that there is this desire to stand out, to be an individual. And the moon is actually making a trine to Mars as well. So that's kind of more of the same, this desire for action with this moon making a trine to Mars, square to Jupiter. So that says something about the day from a lunar perspective. But if we think about this concept of excess, have a look at the sun. And the sun it's in Sagittarius, but additionally the sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. So the sun and Jupiter are approximately 135 degrees apart, making a sesquiquadrate. So when you throw sun and Jupiter together, you have this rather hard aspect, which is a sesquiquadrate, 135 degrees, 3/8 of a circle. This aspect can encourage us to go further, and it can always be good to go further. We don't want to stay in one place, particularly with the sun in Sagittarius. But we might do it in a way that could be quite clumsy. We might take things too far. Alternatively, we could say, well, the Sun in Sagittarius is sesquiquadrate Jupiter in Cancer. Maybe Jupiter in Cancer has its own interests. Jupiter in Cancer is quite an emotional placement for Jupiter. It can be quite traditional, wanting to do things in a particular way. And so when you throw Sun and Jupiter together in the form of a sesquiquadrate, we kind of get a rather interesting picture. So yeah, the Sun in Sagittarius is very positive, wants to take action, wants to do something, but what kind of action? Maybe Jupiter in Cancer defines that action. So some of us with Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter might, for example, be quite traditional or quite moralistic. We might want to hold on to what we believe in an active way. So that is a way of looking at the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter. I mean, I will be talking more about Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter because at the end of the video I want to do a preview of the year ahead and the month ahead, and I think that we should look at the starting positions. What's going on. The moment November turns to December, and that's what I'll be looking at the end of the video. And one other thing, Moon is late in Aries, and tomorrow, Tuesday, at 3:13 a.m., the Moon does go into Taurus, but that's British time, UK time. So from an American perspective, well, if you're in New York, tonight at 10:13, the Moon will go into Taurus. And that would be 7:13 this evening if you're on the West Coast. Even earlier if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. So if you are in the Americas, okay, not all of the Americas. I think if you're in Brazil or Chile, then the Moon I don't think will go into Taurus today. But if you're in, for example, parts of the United States, all of the United States, then at some stage this evening, then there will be a sign change, and that sign change, could change the atmosphere somewhat, make things a bit slower, a bit more considered. But it is this evening, and is anything going to be happening this evening? Well, if you are in the United States, then Moon moving into Taurus, that might slow things down. So that's the picture. If we set the chart to New York, noon New York, if we set the chart for noon in Sydney, Australia, there's the chart. So the Moon at noon in Sydney is at 14 degrees Aries. Well, the Moon is earlier in Aries than it would be if you're in New York. The Moon will of course be in Aries all day long if you're in Australia and New Zealand, as is the case in Europe, for example, and Africa. Possibly the main lunar aspect here is the Moon Moon applying to the trine of Mars. And so Moon is at 14 Aries, applying to a trine of Mars at sort of 19 Sagittarius, and so that might say so. Also, we should perhaps say the Moon is making a trine to the Sun and then making a trine to the Mars. So really, the Moon is sort of trining the rather sort of wide Sun-Mars conjunction, and I think that's quite active. It's something that you can take advantage of. It's quite exciting. So do take advantage of it. Of course, it is a trine between the Moon and Mars. Well, okay, sometimes you could take things too far. You could get overexcited, but I think overall, that is a good aspect. Turning to the picture heliocentrically. So here is the heliocentric chart for the beginning of the month, December the 1st. And, do remember that, this is a chart where you put the Sun at the center of the solar system. And as far as what we've got, well, we have still got a trine between Mars and Chiron, heliocentrically, remember. And This heliocentric trine kind of says the same thing almost as the fact that geocentrically we've got a moon Chiron conjunction. So, that perhaps emphasizes the Chiron energy, Mars trine Chiron, wanting to do things differently in a way that is perhaps unique, that allows us to stand out as individuals. And that's possibly the main aspect of the day. I mean, Mercury is making a wide opposition to Pluto, so Mercury opposition Pluto. Some of us might feel that there are things to be said, Mercury opposition Pluto, but the question is, are we able to say these words? And something is being hidden, something perhaps relating to the truth. We don't want to reveal the truth, we're holding it to ourselves. That's one way of looking at it. Mercury opposition Pluto can be about trying our hardest to perhaps utilize the facts and manipulate the facts. And it's not like we're going to be deliberately dishonest with Mercury opposition Pluto, but we might try to control the flow of information, or perhaps we're talking about someone else and their efforts to control the information. And of course, don't forget Saturn and Neptune now getting very close to one another, only 16 arc minutes. So the heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction is getting closer and closer. And, as I always say, I don't like repeating myself, but, it is what we're afraid of. There are still things to be concerned about. But, as I've said in other videos, we do have a grand trine, sort of. We've got grand trine energies. We've still got stuff in late Scorpio, for example. Well, we've got Mercury in late Scorpio, and Mercury in late Scorpio is starting to make a grand trine with Jupiter and Saturn. So, but that's geocentrically, and I do think that is potentially optimistic. Plus, we've got the fact we've got Sun in Sagittarius. It is all things being equal, not just Sun, Venus, Mars in Sagittarius geocentrically. So that provides a bit of optimism. And so maybe that counteracts the heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Well, it's not just a heliocentric Saturn-Neptune conjunction, because geocentrically Saturn and Neptune are pretty close to one another. So let me now switch to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, December the 1st, 2025. Aries. It's an action-orientated day, or at least it should be. Aries, there's a lot of stuff in fire signs. Got 4 planets in fire signs: Moon, Venus, Sun, Mars, and of course Mars is your ruler, and the Moon is making a trine to Mars. So you are in a position where you are really able to be the initiator. It may be down to you to create that first spark, to be the one who can be creative, who is able to go out into the world and make things happen. And so Aries, do take advantage of this opportunity, and I think this is a great start to the week, and it's a great start to the month. So in the past perhaps you've been overly concerned about how other people feel, what exactly you should be doing, listening to the vibes, maybe not entirely being yourself, even though Mars was in Sagittarius. But now you're feeling good. It's almost like the month and the day, they're getting off to a good start. At least they should do. All things being equal, and so you're ready for anything. And at the same time, Aries, you're able to quickly evaluate the situation. You don't have to spend ages and ages thinking about things, checking the emotional pulse. No, a lot of things are going to be very apparent to you. And I think that in most cases, you'll get it right. You'll get an accurate impression of whatever is going on. But most cases, not in all cases. There could be moments where you don't fully understand what's happening. You feel unsure of yourself. you feel unsure of what you're seeing, but you might push yourself into making a fast decision. And it is good in most cases to make fast decisions, but there are just certain cases where you need to just consider the possibility that you just haven't got all the facts. That you might come to a quick solution, but it might be the wrong solution. But on the plus side, as an Aries, you can be very intuitive, and if a solution seems forced, you are sort of deliberately taking shortcuts, then I think you'll know that you've got it wrong. So I am certainly encouraging you to do things quickly, to make quick decisions, not to ponder. But perhaps, Aries, you need to consider what areas are outside your expertise. Maybe they're above your pay grade, as they like to say. Just things that you're not qualified to decide about. And so you do have to make that distinction. And you certainly shouldn't allow yourself to be pressurized by anyone. That's unnecessary, because today is a day when you can be yourself. As well, we've got heliocentrically, we've got Mars making a trine to Chiron, and we've got geocentrically, we've got the moon making a conjunction to Chiron. So you could say, Aries, that the Chiron energy is strong at the moment. And, that Chiron energy, well, we can talk about wounds and one can get psychological about it and think about what happened in the past and why you might want to act in the way you do. But do we need to go down that road? I don't think we necessarily do. I mean, the point is, with those Chiron aspects, geocentrically and heliocentrically, is that you want to be yourself. I mean, there may be all sorts of complicated reasons why you want to be yourself, but yeah, we don't need to consider those, I don't think. Instead, it's about just you being an individual and doing what you have to do to stand out as an individual. And I think that by and large you're going to get it right. Not everyone will be pleased. Some people are just more happy if everyone is just doing what's expected of them. But you can't do that. It's not a day for just following the crowd, making everyone comfortable. No, that's absolutely not what today is about, Aries. So I'm pretty positive about today, and as far as relationships are concerned, it needn't be a bad thing. I mean, today, always energy. I mean, you come over as an exciting person. I mean, it depends on the relationship, but excitement is very often an important part of a relationship. Maybe someone else is feeling bored, dissatisfied. They need someone like you to come in and sort of, create some action. So I think that relationships, can certainly work, on your terms. Of course, this is not a day for doing things in someone else's way. Taurus, it is quite an active day. I mean, in general, there's a lot happening. We've got planets in fire signs, and it may seem that other people are moving quickly. I mean, you yourself are able to move quicker in some respects. I mean, don't forget that Venus is moving. Venus, your ruler, has just moved into Sagittarius. So Venus moving into Sagittarius, that is a big change. It's spent all this time in Scorpio, and a sign where Venus, it doesn't necessarily work very well, and Venus is in its detriment, is in its detriment in Scorpio, and so Venus moving out of Scorpio just gives you more freedom, and perhaps you can, for example, walk away from another person's shadow and just have a real sense of your own identity. But with all this stuff going on, it might at times be a little bit too much. Do you really want to have to deal with it all? And I think that what you don't want to do, Taurus, is to have to worry too much about what other people are doing, because other people may just be going faster than you. I mean, you're perhaps moving faster relative to how you were, say, a few days ago, because Venus has moved into Sagittarius, and in your own way, you are getting used to a new and perhaps more exciting environment. But you don't want to go too fast, and you're still perhaps finding your feet. And so, Taurus, you don't have to be in a hurry. You don't have to feel obliged to start anything, to be the initiator. Yeah, you might feel that you should, but I don't think you necessarily have to. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then this evening when the moon moves into Taurus, you might have your chance. You might feel that you understand things enough, but until this evening, and probably until tomorrow, you won't just be sufficiently grounded, and you'll feel that you just don't have the equipment, you don't have the information, and you just don't have enough sort of get up and go to really make things happen. So perhaps, Taurus, it's a day for soaking up the vibes, appreciating that there has been a change, but you don't necessarily have to be part of this change, and instead you can just watch and feel the excitement. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to be part of that excitement. Though when it comes to relationships and dealing with other people, I think you're going to be pretty effective. I think that you'll have the ability to relate, to respond, to get on with people, to look for common ground. Yeah, in fact, I think you're going to be quite good at finding common ground between yourself and others, even if you don't know them very well. I mean, I think that the concept of people working together rather than fighting one another is going to be important to you. And so maybe in your own quiet way, you can smooth things over and find ways of getting on with people. So that looks good, but you don't need to feel that it's any great obligation on your part. It really isn't. If you have a chance to be a nice person, then do take that chance. But it's not obligatory. And some Taurians may just feel that they don't really want to do very much, and if so, that's fine. But it is also there is also a sense of preparation here, and it just may not be that today is the right day, and it might not be until tomorrow, or at least this evening, that you're ready to really do things. Gemini. Well, Gemini, you are starting to enjoy, I hope, the fact that Mercury is now stationary. It is stationary. It's direct. It's getting faster now. It changed direction, over the weekend, and so with Mercury now moving forward, you may yourself feel that you're moving forward, that things are slowly coming together, and this is something you're going to feel over the course of a week as Mercury moves towards a trines with Jupiter and Saturn. I think this is important. In fact, Mercury is already part of a grand trine involving Mercury, Jupiter and Saturn, and so this is really fortunate. And increasingly, Gemini, you may feel that you're increasingly in tune with what is happening, and sometimes, Gemini, you can be alone. Your ideas may not accord with other people's ideas. It's nice being unique, but sometimes when you're unique, you can also be isolated. But I think that now Mercury is making those aspects of Jupiter and Saturn you are on the right wavelength and you understand what is happening. And part of that understanding is your ability to just slow things down. I mean, I know that Gemini has a reputation for being, quite a fast sign, not wanting to stay in one place for too long. But, with Mercury, moving slowly through Scorpio, you can give yourself time to understand what is happening. So you don't have to be in a hurry at all. And, in terms of what is happening, that can relate to money, it can relate to your work, it could relate to business, it just could relate to the overall political and social situation in which you are living. So don't feel rushed, don't feel that anything has to be forced, because things are moving your way, but in a way that is sort of natural and organic. Now, as far as other people are concerned, I don't think it's a day when you have to be alone. Far from it. Venus has just gone into Sagittarius, your opposite sign. So, with Venus moving into Sagittarius, that may well say something about relationships. I mean, that is a sort of a classic significator of relationships. Venus being in Gemini's opposite sign. And I'm sure if you look at any sort of daily or even weekly horoscope for today, December the 1st, you'll see the astrologer hinting at something to do with relationships, something to do with Venus. It's kind of easy, isn't it? So that's something you might want to think about. And also the moon is in Aries. So the moon is in Aries, it's making a trine to Mars. And so with moon in Aries, that's a great place for the moon. Particularly if you're a Gemini. I mean, you like a bit of action sometimes, and that moon in Aries, can provide it. And you shouldn't necessarily try, too hard to think things through. We are now at a time, Gemini, when there aren't any planets in earth signs, air signs. No, well, there aren't any planets in earth signs except for Uranus, but it's the air signs that matter. You are an air sign, and so we got Pluto in Aquarius, but that is it. And so as far as action and the positive is concerned, ideas on their own might not be enough. And I think, Gemini, you realize that. I think every Gemini realizes that. I mean, Geminis can be very sort of ideas people, and they can have lots of ideas, but very often these ideas get absolutely nowhere. And so with all these planets in fire signs, that's what you have to take. And as far as is possible, Gemini, try to make things happen, and don't spend too long talking about them. Now, if you are unable to take the initiative, and sometimes that can be a problem for Geminis. Geminis, they can have lots of ideas, but actually committing themselves can be hard work, can be impossible. You might overthink things. So if you're in that kind of situation, well, maybe someone else can do it for you. You don't always have to be the initiator. Let someone else use their fire to move you forward, because you live in a social world, and it's quite a sociable situation at the moment. With the moon in Aries, with the moon making a trine to Mars, that is very very active, and it could be, Gemini, that you're able to actually utilize other people's energy in a way that may be ever so slightly manipulative. I think you can be manipulative at the moment. And you can perhaps do the preparations, you can think ahead, and you might not be ready to do something, to take that initiative, to take that risk, but perhaps someone else is prepared to do it for you. So if that is the case, Gemini, it's important that you are not alone, that you are in contact with other people, that you're talking to them. Perhaps your ideas can lead to action. Maybe that's part of a manipulation, but it's not really a day for ideas. I mean, or ideas just have limited value. I mean, ideas on their own are just not going to go anywhere, and at some stage, theory does have to be turned into practice. But I think the possibilities for action, are all over the place, and you can certainly prepare the ground, no doubt about that. I think you're going to have a good sense of detail over the course of the day, and not just today, actually, over the next few days. I think that you're going to be quite good at preparing the ground. And yeah, maybe it's a situation where someone else has to take the action, and you can create a situation where they can take that action. But overall, Gemini, I think it's a good day, and I think the next few days could be very interesting, and you should as far as possible be the initiator. But if you feel you can't, then just see what other people have got to offer, and perhaps you can create a situation where someone else does something and you're maybe able to take advantage of it. Cancer. The moon is in Aries for, well, much of the day. I mean, all of the day, certainly if you're not in the Americas. If you're in the United States, for example, then this evening the moon moves into Taurus. But I mean, I think the moon in Aries is kind of what matters. And as far as what that means for the moon to be in Aries, well, it's a Monday. It's the beginning of the month, and Cancer, you may be feeling that it's time to do something. Perhaps time to take the initiative. You may not want to take the initiative. You may regard that as being someone else's job, but I think you do have here a certain responsibility, because in many cases it'll be other people looking to you to have the ideas, for the one to take the first step forward, and also be the person who can maybe organize and structure. Might not be something you want to do, but certainly if you're going into work today, or if you have your own business, then the focus is going to be on you, and you might resent that. But on the other hand, I think that you at the moment have sort of natural sort of organizational abilities, and you're able to assert yourself quite strongly, and in a way that is fairly individual. I mean, the moon is making a conjunction to Chiron, and it's also making a trine to Mars, and so with those aspects, I do think that you know how to project yourself, and you know how to project your ideas in such a way that people will take note of you. They will listen, and they'll be prepared to accommodate you. So Cancer, there is quite a high level of responsibility here, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. And this is particularly the case if you have any form of leadership, however minor. If you're in any position where you are telling people what to do, or you are taking the lead, if you're in any kind of position, and it doesn't have to be at work, it can be in the family, wherever, whatever you're doing, use that position, leverage it, because you are just in the right position. You are in the right position to inspire and organize, and so I hope that you are going to be able to see it through. And leadership aside, even if other people are not around, I think that you're going to be quite good at just getting things together. If something needs to be done, maybe in your own life, something isn't right, something needs to be changed, you think that something could be better, then I think you'll know what to do, and you'll be able to be quite constructive. And if you see a problem, if you see that something that's not being done, then you're going to say this has got to be done. And perhaps in terms of your family, or your household, or maybe just you. So if there's anything missing, and I think you'll know if anything is missing, it'll just be completely obvious. It'll just, things will just come together, and you'll say, well, something's not right, and let's sort it out now. And so that might be another thing about today. If you feel that something is not right, but something is missing, but something hasn't been done well, then don't wait. Solve the issue now, like right this moment. And that might not be something you want to do, but I think you can do it. So that is, yeah, so it's really important to seize the moment it occurs to you. And if you wait until tomorrow, then you might have moved on to something else. So Cancer, the more dynamic and responsible you can be, the better. And if you can, as far as is possible, adopt a position of leadership, then I think that very much you'll be doing the right thing. Leo, it's a day when things are happening. I mean, it is an active day for everyone, regardless of their sign, I think, and it's really a powerful start to the new month. And of course, it's the start of a new week, if you take the view that Monday is the beginning of a week. And I think, Leo, to a great extent, you're going to feel fairly, inspired. You'll be in a position where, you want to make things happen. You want to be the initiator, and you certainly can be the initiator. And the question is, what are you initiating? I'm not saying that you have to push people around. It may be something quite private. It might be about, what you are trying to understand. And, and Leo, it is all about you. I mean, you matter. You're the one you're the one leading your own life. And, it is a time when life can and should be richer and more dynamic, and also you need to be ready and able to take center stage. You don't have to apologize for who you are and what ideas you have, what you believe in, because right now, Leo, there's just something about you that it is powerful and is creative, and you can do things which make you stand out as someone special. And being a Leo, that does matter. And sometimes Leo, you can have a sort of confidence deficit. It can happen for Leos. Not every Leo, but sometimes Leos can be a little bit fragile, and they worry that if they are too keen to promote their own ideas, that they might get sort of knocked down. And maybe that was more when you had all those planets in Scorpio, but we've only got one planet in Scorpio now, and of course the sun, your ruler, is now in Sagittarius. So I really do think, Leo, that you can be confident. You can be confident that you've got it right, and it's just very important not to be self-conscious. It is about you and what you are trying to achieve, and how you are, trying to explore. So don't feel that you have to make a real effort. Don't feel that you're up against anyone. You shouldn't feel like that, because if you do what is natural, then things should really work very well for you. Though it cannot be avoided. One thing cannot be avoided, and that is the fact that the sun is making a sesquiquadrate to Jupiter. And this aspect between Sun and Jupiter, I mean, I will be talking more about this Sun-Jupiter aspect at the end of this video, because I think it is important, because it is an aspect taking place at the beginning of the month. And this aspect can be problematic. And if we've got Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, we do get the idea of taking something too far, overdoing it. Sun in Sagittarius, that's all very well. Sun in Sagittarius, it's a nice creative, fun-loving place for the Sagittarius. But when it makes that sesquiquadrate to Jupiter, something might cut in. Something, I don't know, maybe from your own unconscious mind, feeling you just have to take it further. And there's just some danger that you take something too far and you do something that's almost out of character. There's sort of an inner extremist trying to make itself felt. Now, when I say extremist, I'm not talking about necessarily a political extremist, just being extreme in something you want to do, something you want to apply yourself to. And where there's extremism, there's always the danger of doing yourself an injury. And this Sun Jupiter sesquiquadrate, this particular Sun Jupiter sesquiquadrate, is hasty, and I'm afraid accident prone. And so if you find yourself getting obsessed about something, feeling you have to give it everything, then yeah, you could take something too far. You could break something. You could do yourself an injury. I mean, I don't want to exaggerate. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be super careful, but you need to keep track, Leo, of your own behavior. And as soon as you start taking something too far, as soon as you start exaggerating, as soon as you start becoming an extremist, that could be the point where things start going wrong. And it's all so unnecessary. There's nothing that has to be pushed, because everything should be very natural. Moon, trine Mars, that's very easy. Well, okay, it's not an easygoing aspect, but it's just you naturally being able to make things happen in a way which should be very organic. Virgo. Well, Mercury is now stationary. Mercury it's not more from stationary. It's going direct. It's moving forward, because it went stationary direct over the weekend, and that is an important event for you. For you, Virgo. I mean, after all, Mercury is your ruler, and so with Mercury going stationary direct, you're probably feeling better, and at the same time you're feeling more sure of yourself. Over the last few weeks, while Mercury was retrograde, there may have been times where you wondered whether you were doing the right thing. Did you have the right idea? Maybe you need to hold back, not fully express your feelings and indeed your thoughts, because you just never know how other people are going to respond. But now that Mercury is going stationary direct in Scorpio, I think that you can be more confident about yourself and your ideas and about your plans. And in fact, you could take it further. I think that you can be quite insistent that your way is the right way. Now, there's no such thing as right, to say you are right and someone else is wrong. But then on the other hand, it's what is right for you. And I think, Virgo, you do have a good sense of what is right for you. And I think that you're able to project this extremely well. I think that people will listen, and they will take you seriously. So don't be afraid of saying anything, and don't be afraid of using arguments even to try to push your ideas, because you've got good ideas, and the ideas have been developing over the last few weeks, and now you're getting a sense of clarity. And at the moment, Mercury is moving towards trines with Jupiter and Saturn. So in other words, over the next few days, we've got a grand trine involving Mercury, Jupiter and Saturn, and so that's something that you really should be taking advantage of. I think it's good news. And so you might have thought that in the past that things were difficult, but things are just becoming increasingly easy. So don't just don't exaggerate the problems that you might think that you're working under, because I don't think you are, and I think that things are becoming more straightforward. Still, I understand that there are things going on which are complicated, that you can't understand immediately. But if something is complicated, then I think you have the opportunity for resolving it, for understanding what's going on, and you can do it in your own way. And in fact, Virgo, at the moment, you're going to be very good at doing your own research, being able to really look at something that, on the surface seems difficult, but once you get under the surface, and really understand the nuts and bolts of the issue, I think you'll very soon start to understand, what is going on. And so, the more you think about it, the more obvious it's going to be. And from a sort of a intellectual and cognitive sense, I think your mind is increasingly on, very good form. Better form than it was, a few days ago, and that might mean that you can resolve the most complicated issues. And as I said, at the same time, you come over as being quite a powerful and intense person. The kind of person who I think will be taken seriously. Libra. Venus is now in Sagittarius, as you're possibly aware, and Venus moving out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, I would say, was good news for you, Libra. And Venus is your ruler, and so when Venus was in Scorpio, things were not necessarily great. When you think about Venus in Scorpio, Venus was in its detriment, and with Venus in its detriment, there might have been things that you were worrying about, things that you couldn't express, things that were also perhaps tedious. But now that Venus is moving into Sagittarius, you can more sort of be yourself. Venus is your ruler, not just your ruler, but it's a planet of relationships. So with Venus in Sagittarius, things are just more exciting, and you can feel that excitement, and you can start to tune into your fundamental sociability. I mean, Libra is, all things being equal, quite a sociable sign. I mean, I know that there is a stereotype of Librans being sociable, but it seems to be sort of no doubt about it that Librans really can be. They can be very effective at at sort of understanding the fine social balance around them, and particularly now. And it's not just because Venus is in Sagittarius. It's also because you just have a vision, the way things should be, and indeed it might be a social vision. You have a good sense of how other people can get on with each other, and who gets on with who. So if you're planning parties, or you're trying to bring people together, then I think you're going to be very effective, and you'll know what to do, you'll know who mixes with whom, and at the same time you'll have just an ability to understand other people. It's just a very natural ability, and I'm not really talking about anything particularly emotional. It's more about just, you naturally get it. You don't have to think. You know how things go together, and you know how people go together, and so that can make it for you a very successful day, particularly if you are dealing with others. So try to be as sociable as possible. And that doesn't mean to say you have to meet people face to face. I think your ability, on the phone, on various sort of online methods of communication, it's all going to be very effective, and you will be able to give people enough room. I mean, that does matter. You know when to be quiet. You know when to give people a chance. And some people need a chance. It could be, for example, that someone has not had a full chance to really express themselves, to express their individuality, to express their unique viewpoint. And Libra, if you give someone that chance, it could make things a lot easier. Some things have been unsaid for too long. I mean, perhaps that relates to Mercury going retrograde, and if you give people permission to talk, permission to be completely open about whatever is bothering them, and if you allow people to be individuals, I think they're going to very much appreciate that. And it doesn't impact you. It doesn't say anything about your freedom. Everyone can be free. You give other people a chance to be free, and you also can be giving yourself that same chance. So Libra, things are changing, and I think that things are changing for the better. And having Venus moving into Sagittarius, it just makes things so much easier for you. And it's about your self-expression. It's about other people's self-expression, and it just overall just might feel that finally things are starting to move. Scorpio. The moon is making a trine to Mars. I mean, that I think is quite an important aspect from a Scorpio perspective. I mean, on the surface, it certainly sounds quite dynamic and sort of action orientated, and this means, Scorpio, that you might have a view about the way things should be done, and if something is wrong, you may be sort of quick to intervene. Now, this Moon-Mars trine could have a sort of a materialistic edge. I mean, it's not just about fun and games and excitement and action. The question is, why are you doing what you're doing? And if you feel that something is wrong, or that something has been misplaced, or even that someone has made a mistake, then now might be a time to sort the matter out. And your ability to change things, is going to be really good, particularly when you're changing things that are wrong, that have been done badly. You will be very effective. And so think about your environment. Are you really comfortable where you are? Are you fully comfortable? Could things be slightly better? And I think that very often they could be. I mean, so don't be afraid of making changes. And when it comes to money, some Scorpios could be quite vocal with this moon making a trine to Mars. If something needs to be said, then maybe you shouldn't be too afraid of hurting someone's feelings. Money is important. I think Scorpios recognize this, and I think that one reason Scorpios and money, well, why one reason why they regard it as being important. Well, money is kind of a token of value, of whose value? Your value. It's a kind of a statement of your own worth. I mean, there are many statements of your own worth. It's not just money, but maybe at the moment it's of particular relevance. And if you feel that from a financial perspective something isn't right, then, or you're owed something, then now might be a chance to be quite sort of open about your feelings. And if you are, and you're very clear about how you want things to end up, and then I think that in most cases people will just follow your lead and perhaps give you what you're looking for. Additionally, Scorpio, you have a strong sense of your own individuality. And heliocentrically, we've got a trine between Mars, your ruler, and Chiron. We've got a conjunction between the Moon and Chiron, and so there is a lot of Chiron energy today. And Chiron energy is about doing things your way. And that's Chiron. Chiron is the maverick. Your way is somewhat unusual. It may not be what people were expecting. It may be upsetting. It may be confusing, but it doesn't matter. The point is, you have at some level a desire to stand out. And the reason you have a desire to stand out is, well, maybe because you want to put right the wrongs of the past. Maybe even the wounds of the past can perhaps be healed by you being an individual, right now, and you not caring, what kind of response you get. Now, that's good. Obviously, that is good. It's always good to be an individual. Now, at the same time, there is a possibility that you get confused. You perhaps decide to fight the wrong battle, or you make an assumption. It can happen. So Scorpio, you've got to be emotionally honest. Think about what is important to you. Think about what matters, and so don't just go for the first fight you find. Individuality for the sake of individuality is worthless. It's worse than worthless. It's just a mess. It's just you causing trouble for no gain. So decide what is important. And once you have decided what is important, Scorpio, then you're going to be in a position to be an effective individual. And I think that's the key point. Yeah, you can be an individual today. You can be a real individual. You can stand out as an individual. But you have to do it in such a way that is effective and is genuine and is, in accordance with who you are. Sagittarius. Well, we've got Venus moving into Sagittarius. Venus moved into Sagittarius over the weekend. I didn't really talk about it in great detail, and I think that Venus moving into Sagittarius, as far as you're concerned, is fortunate. I mean, Venus has been in Scorpio for some time, and perhaps with Venus in Scorpio, at times you weren't, fully able to, be yourself, particularly when you were, in company, when you were with people. It just might have been, somewhat strained, and you might have felt that you were holding something back, or maybe someone else was holding something back. And now that Venus is moving into Sagittarius, into your own sign, I think that you can be more open, and I think you're going to be able to project yourself extremely well. People are going to listen, and they're going to understand you, and I think they're also going to be sympathetic to your perspective. And Sagittarius, Venus in your sign can mean that you're able to be fairly dynamic in a social situation. That you're able to make things happen, make people sit up and listen, make people follow your lead. And some people are looking for excitement. They want things to happen. And Sagittarius, it maybe you're the one who can actually be the initiator. And so that perhaps gives you a certain amount of responsibility. I mean, after all, you've got 3 planets in your sign, so the focus is very much on you. It can be hard work having a focus on you, but if things do feel at times a bit sort of flat and lifeless, and you don't have to put up with that situation. You can make things happen. You can lighten things up. You can turn on the lights and illuminate everything, and you can be the spark. Now, there is some danger that you take things too far, because one aspect we do have is a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter. So Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, 135 degrees apart. These planets can be, it's certainly a dynamic aspect, but it can at times just be excessive. You decide you want something, and you decide that it's important, and you don't get it straight away. So with Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, you just might want to take things further and further and further, and really create a scene. And why would that be? Well, it might be Sagittarius. We can talk about freedom and doing what you like and whatever. But, every Sagittarian has a strong sense of right and wrong. They might deny it. They might think, that they can move all over the place. They can have all sorts of opinions. But you do have a strong sense of right and wrong. And it may well be that the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter does emphasize this, to your surprise, perhaps. And maybe if something isn't going entirely your way, or you see something that you regard as being wrong or as offensive, you are going to want to take the initiative. And the question is that the right thing to do? And so there is just some possibility today that you just take something too far. And you have to be very wary of that possibility. And you have to be able to identify it before it causes too much damage. And it could cause damage. And Sagittarius, you could find yourself just taking things too quickly, not considering the consequences, taking too much of a risk, and then potentially getting yourself into trouble. And even doing yourself an injury. That particularly would be the case, if you're doing things which are very physical. So Sagittarius, be aware of that capacity for taking things too far, but at the same time, this shouldn't spoil the day. You can very much do things your way. Things should be very easy. The moon is in Aries. It's making a trine to Mars. That is about fortunate action, and it's action you don't have to stress over. You shouldn't be thinking about conflict. Who do you have to fight against? Who are you up against? It's just not something you have to worry about. And so, if you handle it right, Sagittarius, I think it really can be a great day. Capricorn. If you have been looking or listening to some of my forecasts for the other signs, you might have noticed that I was pretty positive. I think it is a very action-orientated day. Things are definitely moving, and there is a sense of excitement. And the question is, Capricorn, to what extent are you able to partake in all of this? Now, it's true that Saturn quite recently, just a few days ago, was it sort of last week, went stationary direct. So you're certainly enjoying the fact that your ruler is moving forward, and so a lot of things are becoming clearer. And so when you see what's happening around you, there is all this sort of dynamism and action. To an extent, it makes sense, and you can see your role in it all. On the other hand, you may not feel entirely part of it. It could be just something else going on that you are perhaps somewhat suspicious of. So where there is a lot of action, where you see people making a lot of noise, talking, being excited, you have your reservations. And I think it's good to have these reservations. You have to think about what is possible, and also use your experience. It doesn't matter how old you are, but there is just something experienced about Capricorn. They've seen it before, and if you see people being excited about something, well, you kind of know how it's all going to end. Now, you don't want to be excessively negative, but you just have this realism that might not always be appreciated. If you try to be a stereotypical Capricorn, and you try to be down to earth, and you provide good advice, it might not be appreciated, and it might not be your moment. So, Capricorn, don't feel that you have to be at the center of things, and even if you are absolutely sure about what is right and wrong, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should always express those feelings, because it just might be sort of out of sync. And so there might be an argument, Capricorn, today for, to an extent, biding your time. You can watch what other people are doing. Of course, if someone is going to do something really crazy, you've got to intervene, but you don't have to be there, all the time. And, at the same time, as far as, relationships are concerned, I think it's likely that, the other person is, possibly going to be more active and more dynamic than you. And, if so, then so be it. That shouldn't be a problem. And in fact, Capricorn, I'd probably advise against taking your own initiatives. You might feel you want to do something, or you might rather feel you're forced to do something. You're trying to join the crowd. But, if you do the first thing that comes to mind, then you might get it wrong. You maybe because you're trying too hard, or maybe you're listening to the wrong people. And okay, Capricorn is, as I've said, supposed to be a responsible sign. But if you try to be positive, if you try to be really active, then the more active you are, the more dynamic you are, then in a way, the more likely it is that something could go wrong, the more likely it is that you'll be mistaken. And so, that is another good reason, Capricorn, for not doing anything different, not breaking your routine, not being tempted to break your routine, and, instead focusing, on your strengths. And, right now, your strengths are stability, basically. I mean, stability does matter to you at the moment, and you want to make sure that everything is in order and you feel comfortable. And that, I think, is the best way of handling today's energies. Aquarius, you're at the moment, I would have said, fairly sociable. I think that you have a good understanding of other people, and I think that you're going to be, enjoying whatever other people are doing. And so, don't feel that you have to do everything on your own, and don't feel that other people have nothing to offer. Especially now that Venus is moving into Sagittarius. So Venus has been in Scorpio for some time, and Venus is the planet of relationships. And so with Venus moving into Sagittarius, joining the Sun and Mars in Sagittarius, so I've got 3 planets in Sagittarius, that means, Aquarius, that you might feel that things really are starting to happen. It's December the 1st. It's a run up to Christmas. It's a time when people tend to be more sociable. So I think that you can really sort of get into the spirit of things. And I think that your ability to talk, tell everyone what's on your mind is going to be pretty good. I mean, the moon makes a trine to Mars. So yeah, see what people have to offer. Indulge in conversation if that's the way you feel. And I think that that's fine. However, Aquarius, I would be slightly wary of doing things on your own, particularly if you've got big projects. You might feel that you want to do something today, beginning of a new week, why not? But if you are in a position where you feel you have to take on new responsibilities, do something, be in the center of things, then it might not work out. You might think it's going to work out. But as soon as you're really active, as soon as you're really engaging, then the problems might arise and things might not go quite as expected. And it could be because you've made a fundamental miscalculation. You thought you understood something. You then thought that you were going to be able to take action. You take that action, and then you realize that action might have been mistaken or perhaps based on a false premise. And so, Aquarius, be very aware of that possibility, and instead, be observant. I mean, observe what other people are doing. Don't necessarily bring anything new to the table. I mean, you've got loads of ideas. You always got new ideas. There's always things you'd like to do. But, do you have to initiate anything today? And I think that the answer is probably no, you don't. I think that you perhaps need to instead just, enjoy the excitement of other people, but without committing yourself, without being the one who takes the lead. Now, that raises a question about whether or not you can rely on other people. And I'm not entirely convinced that you should totally trust anyone. Some people are capable of taking things too far. People who perhaps should know better. Partners, spouses, they might have their ideas. They might want to do things, and they might be quite insistent about it. But particular individuals who are very impatient, who want things to happen quickly, should maybe be avoided, or perhaps they need to be corrected. Because it does seem that there are a couple of people who are rather hasty, and they're in the mood for action, and they could do something which doesn't work out. They could make a complete mess of something if they're not careful. So do be aware of that possibility. Pisces. A lot of stuff now in Sagittarius. Venus went into Sagittarius at the end of the weekend, so we've now got 3 planets in Sagittarius: Venus, Sun, Mars. And Sagittarius is an important sign from your perspective. It's a sign that very much projects itself outwards and wants to be taken seriously, and also can be quite responsible. You're thinking about what you are supposed to be doing, what kind of impression you're making. And so with that Sagittarius emphasis, Pisces, do think about what you are trying to achieve, what you are trying to do. And if there is something you want to do, particularly as it's the beginning of a new week, new month as well, then now might be the time to get going on it. Don't hesitate anymore. Take advantage of the Sagittarius season. Now that it is in full swing, and so it really is okay to think about your own priorities, and you can't sort of be swimming around forever. And you shouldn't be distracted by the fact that we've got a run up to Christmas and all of that. Maybe some people slow down in December, but no, these first couple of weeks of December can be very useful. And so I think it is very important that you take advantage of it all, but also that you show some discipline. Discipline does matter, especially now that we've got a sesquiquadrate between the Sun and Jupiter. So Sun, Jupiter. Obviously, Jupiter is your ruler, and so with the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, we do think about things that are excessive, taking something too far. And why would you take something too far? Well, the issue might be that you might just scatter your energy. There might be lots of things you want to do, and you want to do them all at once. And that might be how Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter works. I mean, that's looking at Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter in a negative sense. Now, we can look at it in a positive sense. Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter is about you being exaggerated and excessive, but in a way that is focused and perhaps constructive. So maybe the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter will allow you to put everything you've got into something with great enthusiasm and with great certainty that you're doing the right thing. But you do have to be so focused, because the problem with Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter is it can get distracted. And once it gets distracted, it can get itself into trouble. So try not to be distracted. I think that is very important. And if you can just keep focused, then I think that things should really, work out pretty well for you. And also we have a trine between the moon and Mars, and I think this moon trine Mars indicates, Pisces, that you can really look after your own interests. Your own interests do matter, and you can really start to think about, what is important to you. And sometimes in the process of pursuing your own interests, you have to stand out, and you have to be a bit of a troublemaker. It might not be what you want to do. You might want to keep everyone happy, but there are limits to how much you can keep everyone happy. If you just if you don't express your feelings and your opinions, then that's not going to make you happy, and then in your own way you're going to be disruptive. So perhaps you should stand out straight away if you feel that something needs to be said. That's particularly the case if money is involved, or it's something to do with your ambitions, and you feel that you're not being given enough airtime, people aren't listening to you. Then I think that you are able to make a fuss, and I think you can be very effective about it. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to move to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And this hexagram does not move. So the corners of the mouth, this can say something about what we consume, what we eat. And so over the course of the day, many of us might be thinking about what we eat, whether we're eating the right things, and making sure that our diet is in good order. So I don't know if you're I suppose if you're in the United States, you might be thinking about Thanksgiving and the aftermath of Thanksgiving. I don't know if Thanksgiving is important to you, whether your diet changed over the course of Thanksgiving, but in which case you might want to change back, and you might be wanting to think more carefully about what you are eating and what you're drinking. Of course, I'm not giving any medical advice. This is more about sort of lifestyle. But do think about it. Think about what you are consuming, and it's also about what you're saying. The corners of the mouth, what comes out of your mouth, what you are saying. Are you saying the right things? And it may be today that your words matter. Saying the right word can be very important. It can make all the difference between making a good impression and falling flat. So those words really are important. And this hexagram, the corners of the mouth, because remember, we don't have any moving lines here, so it's locked. And one way of understanding the corners of the mouth is to look at the nuclear hexagram. And the nuclear hexagram is if we knock out the top and the bottom lines, and then we just focus on the middle lines, and we ask ourselves, what are the top 3 lines of those middle 4 lines, and what are the bottom 3 lines? And so the nuclear hexagram of the corners of the mouth is hexagram number 2, which is the receptive. So the corners of the mouth, in a way, is a receptive hexagram. It's not what we are necessarily giving out, because receptive is pure passivity. And we've got 6 broken lines, pure negativity. And so with that negativity, it's perhaps a time with the corners of the mouth that we shouldn't be necessarily trying to create something new, and I do think that matters. And so one way of looking at the corners of the mouth is we've got quite a lot on our plate. I mean, one way of looking at it is to say, well, our mouth is full. Greg Winkup, he talks about it in terms of bulging cheeks. In his translation, I think he has like a hamster or something with bulging cheeks, because the hamster has just eaten too much and it has to consume what it's got on its plate. It's not a time for taking on anything new. And I think that's an important point about the corners of the mouth. We must finish what's on our plate, and it's not a time for taking new initiatives. I mean, I know that contradicts what I've said astrologically. Astrologically, I've talked about all the fire and how we've got to do things and how we can initiate, but the I Ching is giving a different view, and we have to finish. Maybe there are things we want to do, but first of all, we've got to finish what's on our plate. And the passivity also relates to our ability to observe and observe other people. Perhaps we're trying to make decisions about whether other people can be trusted. This is not a time where we have to ask loads of questions. No, we can just observe, and we can observe what people are doing. And in particular, the Wilhelm translation says that we ask or suggests that we look at what people are eating, because that can tell us a lot. So what do we mean by what people are eating? I'm not literally talking about what people are eating. Can you judge someone on what they're eating? But instead, you're asking what sustains them. Different people are sustained by different things. You can tell this from their conversation. What they're talking about, what's important to them. Listen. What some people are obsessed about. Well, they are obsessed about food. Maybe other people, when they're talking about food all the time, maybe that's what sustains them. Or it could be money, it could be power, whatever. And so listen. You don't have to say anything. And once you know what is important to another person, you're in a position to judge them, and you're in a position to know, whether or not to trust them. And it is a passive process. And this hexagram, the corners of the mouth, because it's got no moving lines, does indicate that today is quite passive. There is nothing that you should be trying to do. Again, this contradicts the astrology, but instead, it's about finishing what's on your plate. It's about observing and looking at what you're eating. Are you eating the right things? Also, are you saying the right things? And so there's perhaps some work to be done, but it's the kind of work that isn't necessarily obvious, and you don't have to stand out here. And so that's the I Ching, and I just want to finish with a brief preview of December. I was kind of hoping to have done a separate video with the 12 signs for December, but I didn't get it together. So instead, I'm just going to look at some of the things happening over the course of a month that we should perhaps be thinking about. So let's start off by looking at the chart for the beginning of the month. I mean, why not? This is quite a calendar thing, and it, to a small extent, depends on where you are. But if we look at the beginning of the month, set for New York, this is a moment in New York when November becomes December, midnight, December the 1st, 2025. Just to give us an idea about what the month starts off with. And you could argue that this is, certainly from a perspective of New York, is a chart for the month, and it's going to be the same or fairly similar wherever you are, because when you have the beginning of a day or the beginning of a year or the beginning of a month, it always happens at midnight, and so the sun is always going to be pretty close to the IC. I mean, that's obvious, that's logical, and at this time of year, at this latitude, Virgo is always going to be rising. And so looking at this chart and saying something about about this year. Sorry, this month. We cannot avoid the fact that the Sun is sesquiquadrate Jupiter, and I do think that is an important aspect. Now that this Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter may colour the day, may colour, say something about what today, Monday, is like. I think it will. I mean, that's its most likely manifestation, and additionally, it may colour the whole month possibly. So I wanted to just start by looking at the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter, and so here is the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter. When the Sun is 135 degrees from Jupiter. So the Sun is at 0 degrees, 9 degrees 30 Sagittarius. Jupiter is at 24:30 Cancer. And so, what's that about? Now, I've already suggested that Sun-Jupiter sesquiquadrate could be quite moralistic because, the Sun is ruled by Jupiter. It's in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is quite a moralistic sign. Sagittarius, because of its Jupiter rulership, can have strong feelings of right and wrong. What is moral? What is immoral? What is right? Yeah, and what is right? And getting offended if someone does the wrong thing. That can be a way in which a Sun-Jupiter sesquiquadrate can work. And Jupiter's strong in Cancer, and Cancer is quite an opinionated sign. Cancer does have beliefs, so you put Sun and Jupiter together, and there is a moralism to Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter. And then if we look at the 90-degree dial, and we put the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter onto that. See, when you've got a sesquiquadrate and you put it on a 90-degree dial, it comes over as an opposition. It looks like an opposition. So let's look at the Sun sesquiquadrate Jupiter. So there it is, and you see there's the Sun and Jupiter. They're opposition each other, and we look at the midpoints, and one midpoint, well, two midpoints that really come to mind are the fact that the Sun is conjunct the I think, the Venus-Mars midpoint, and it is square the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So that, see, that there's that Venus-Uranus. There's Venus and Uranus. Remember, Venus and Uranus are in opposition in the main chart, because you've got sort of Venus at around 0 degrees Sagittarius. You've got Uranus at 29 Taurus. So there's your Venus-Uranus opposition, because an opposition is shown as a conjunction on the 90-degree dial. There is Mars, and so the Sun is right on that midpoint, and Mars and Uranus are quite a dangerous pair, and they can be about explosions. They can be about things going wrong, people being very hasty, that wanting results, and it can be accident prone. And then you put that on Venus-Mars. Okay, Venus-Mars is about charisma, and there's a certain sexuality to Venus-Mars. So this Sun-Jupiter is on the Venus-Mars midpoint. I mean, so that it can be a day which in its own way is quite seductive, and people are trying to seduce and attract. I mean, not necessarily in terms of one-to-one relationships always. It's people just trying to be clever, trying to be seductive, trying to get people to do things their way through their charms and their charisma. So that's could be Sun on the Venus-Mars conjunction, but it's also Sun on the Mars-Uranus conjunction. I think that's perhaps most concerning, and it could be just a whole month where things just happen because of that Sun on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, but Sun and Jupiter on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. But it might say something about the day. But I think it's kind of interesting that that is one of the things that the month does start off with. So aside from that, so if we look at the overall chart for the month, and we can go back to it, is we've got planets in Sagittarius at the beginning of the month. Let's go back to so we start the month with 3 planets in Sagittarius. So this is what we normally get in December. We expect the Sun to be in Sagittarius, and very often Venus or Mercury is going to be in Sagittarius. In this case, we have a strong Sagittarian start, and what happens is with this time of year, you get a Capricorn drift. So as you move into December, you often get more planets moving into Capricorn. I mean, that's quite logical and to be expected. So you could say that the first half of the month is more about Sagittarius, and we get, if you like, we get peak Sagittarius after about the 11th of December. From the 11th of December to the 15th of December is when we've got 4 personal planets in Sagittarius. We're going to have Mercury, Venus, Sun, Venus, Mars in there. So from a Sagittarian perspective, all of the sort of the hype and the speculation and the excitement, those days between the 11th and the 15th, when you've got those 4 planets in Sagittarius, that's when it all happens. But then from the 15th onwards, you get planets moving into Capricorn. On the 15th, Mars moves into Capricorn. I think on the 21st, the Sun moves into Capricorn. Then on the 24th, Venus moves into Capricorn. So from the 15th onwards, Capricorn starts to make itself felt. And I think Mars moving into Capricorn is certainly I think it's good news. Mars moving into Capricorn. I mean, Mars moves into its exaltation in Capricorn, and I'm looking forward to Mars moving into Capricorn. I'm not really enjoying Mars moving into Sagittarius. Why am I not enjoying Mars moving into Sagittarius? Why am I not enjoying Mars moving through Sagittarius? Well, I mean, this is kind of a technical note, so I don't really want to talk about myself, but as a technical note, from a perspective of perfections, I'm in from a perfection point of view, my ascendant has perfected to Leo, so the Sun is my annual ruler at the moment, and I've got my Sun in Gemini, and so when Mars is moving through Sagittarius, it's opposition sign to sign, my Sun. And I'm really beginning to feel that. I really feel this Mars opposition my Sun, even though it's not an exact opposition. I'm really feeling it, and so I'm really looking forward to Mars moving out of Sagittarius, so into Capricorn, so it can stop making this opposition to my Sun, because it's getting annoying, and it's kind of aggravating me. You don't need to know about my aggravations, but I'm just telling you how I'm experiencing it. It's nothing serious. Don't worry about it. Maybe it's more about mental angst or whatever, but that's something I have noticed, and so. That's something to look forward to, I think, not just for me, but I think for everyone. Mars moving into the sign of its exaltation, and the growing Capricorn feel as we move through December. Now, going back on around the 10th, the 9th and the 10th, of course, I'll be talking about these in sort of much greater detail sort of later on. But when I do my videos, over the course of a month, we do have. Well, for a start, we've got Neptune going stationary direct. And so Neptune going stationary direct. Neptune, is just it's in the last degree of Pisces, and it doesn't go any further back. And so, with Neptune going stationary direct, this this could represent, a time of confusion. Neptune goes stationary direct quite close to Skeet, that rather difficult fixed star, and so we might be thinking about water damage or flooding and death and destruction. Well, the trouble is that Neptune goes stationary direct at the same time as Mars is making a square to Saturn. So you can see that Mars is, beginning of a month, Mars is at 19 Sagittarius, but it's only 6 degrees short of the square of Saturn. And so, yeah, by the 10th or something like that, Mars is square Saturn, and I do think that could be quite a difficult aspect, and particularly as it is taking place at the same time as Neptune on the as Neptune going stationary direct. So there is perhaps something to watch out for there. And the Mars, having made the square to Saturn, it moves on and makes a quincunx to Uranus, just before it moves into Capricorn. And so that's around the 14th approximately of 13th, 14th of December. So that quincunx between Mars and Uranus, is kind of more of the same. And it's saying that sort of mid-December, we have to watch out for that. And that may say something about what's happening in the world. I mean, where are the trouble spots? A trouble spot, well, Venezuela. What's Trump going to do in Venezuela? What's happening in Ukraine? So, but there may be other places we don't know about. So I would have sort of highlighted the middle of the month as perhaps being the most difficult, and because you have to look at Mars. It's really just before Mars moves into Capricorn, because Mars, having made the square to Saturn, and it then doesn't just make a quincunx to Uranus, it also makes a square to Neptune. And so Mars is causing a lot of problems just before it moves into Capricorn. And I think that we have to be very careful here. I think that that is, I would have said, the most dangerous part of the month, maybe, but maybe we can extend it further. And because the Sun and the Mars are moving together, and on the 18th of December, around then, we've got Sun square Saturn. So maybe a Sun, and then of course the Sun will make a square to Neptune. So in that period, middle to late December, that whole period, maybe not even mid to late, I think just mid-December, in the run-up to the solstice, when you've got the Sun and Mars squaring Saturn and Neptune, that's perhaps where the real difficulties lie, where things could get unexpectedly difficult. And so if once we get past that, once we get to the solstice, you could argue that maybe beyond the solstice and into the actual Christmas period, it's possible that the month will start to calm down. So those are a few thoughts about the month. I think what I see about the month. I think there's a lot going on this month, particularly in the sort of the middle of the month, and over the course of the next month, when I do my daily horoscopes, I will be looking at them in detail. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.